What did your teacher do that should have gotten them fired? During math class, the principal called my boy's name over the intercom. Lockdown, lockdown, this is not a drill. Nick Cruz has been identified as an active shooter in an anonymous tip. All students must evacuate classrooms immediately. Red lights flashed in the hallway. My stomach dropped. Nick was the kid who quit wrestling because it involved hurting people. This morning, he'd texted me pictures of the golden retriever puppy he was picking up today. Before we could process what was going on, Miss Carmichael suddenly moved to block the front door. That's when I heard it. Beep. Student badge access disabled. Nobody moves. You're safer with me. The whole class froze. Even the class clown's voice was shaking. But the announcement said evacuate. I said sit down. We stay here. Miss Ray Carmichael's face was flushed, sweat beading on her forehead. She kept glancing at the door's window like she was watching for something. Miss Carmichael, please, they said Nick has a... Suddenly Duke was interrupted by the sound of my phone buzzing with a text from Nick. Dude, why is everyone messaging me? I stared at the text like a deer in headlights. And by the time I tried to respond, Miss Carmichael was already snatching my phone. Everyone give me their phones, NOW. She was collecting them frantically, but my screen was still lit up with Nick's chat. Missy Carmichael, look. I held up my phone showing Nick's text with the timestamp. He's not even in school. He just texted, stop covering for him. Her voice was ice cold. You think I don't know how boys protect each other? But the timestamp? I said give me your phone, NOW. Her eyes caught it and she scrolled up. Her whole face changed when she hit last night's messages about Nick's ex-girlfriend. A K.A. Kilkenny, Mississippi Carmichael's daughter. The whole class gawked as she read them out. Kilkenny won't stop calling. She left me 66 missed calls, bro. She's lost it. Mrs. Carmichael's knuckles went white, gripping my phone. That little shit... She tried to stop herself, but it was too late. I'd already seen it. Her face was filled with rage. After what he did. Breaking up with her in front of everyone, she muttered. I heard someone gasp. The whole class saw what happened between Nick and Kilkenny. Nick told her he didn't love her anymore in private, but Kilkenny cried so loudly that it gained the attention of the entire school. I glanced over to Kilkenny's desk, and that's when I noticed it. Her chair was empty. That's when we heard it. Pop, 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 like firecrackers down the hall. But not. Everyone hit the floor instinctively. Kids were crying. Someone threw up into their book bag. Mrs. Carmichael stayed standing, blocking the door, texting frantically on her phone. Please, Sophia begged. We need to hide. What if Nick... He humiliated her! Missy Carmichael's mask finally cracked, in front of my colleagues. Made her look pathetic, and now he thinks he can just move on? Get his perfect little dog and his perfect little life? The popping sounds were getting closer. We could all hear screaming in the distance. Real screaming. The kind that makes your bones cold. Miss Carmichael, my voice came out steadier than I felt. Where's Kilkenny? Really? Her face went white. Her phone buzzed and she looked at it, then back at us. She needed to. Someone mentioned they'd seen Kilkenny this morning wearing baggy clothes, walking weird near the south entrance. Hood up, hands in her pockets. The principal's voice crackled through the intercom once more. Miss Carmichael, your room shows as unsecured. Evacuate immediately. She ripped the cord from the wall. More shots came. Bang, bang, bang. Not pops anymore. Real gunshots. Closer to one hallway over. Mrs. Carmichael was mumbling now, tears streaming down her face as she frantically dialed numbers into her phone. Pick up, pick up! Back down and hide, baby, just hide. The doorknob rattled violently. Everyone screamed. Through the window, I could see a 5'6" figure in a blue hoodie with a basketball number, 67, same as Nick's. Under their hood, I could make out short blonde hair, and I wondered if it really was my boy. Nobody move, Mrs. Carmichael whispered. Nobody make a sound. The figure was panicking, hitting the door harder. My heart was racing. Was it really him? None of this made sense. We could hear shouting. Stop! Get down! Drop the weapon! The figure spun toward the voices down the hall, and as they raised their fist to pound again, the hood started to fall back. And that's when we finally found out who the shooter was. The hood fell back completely, and I saw Kilkenny's face through the small window in the door. Tears were running down her cheeks, and she was wearing Nick's blue basketball jersey with the number 67 printed across the front. Mrs. Carmichael made a sound like someone punched her in the stomach and started crying hard while her phone shook in her hand. She was still blocking the door, even though we could all see it was her daughter outside and not Nick. Commands started echoing from somewhere down the hall, and I heard multiple voices shouting for someone to get down on the ground right now. Kilkenny spun away from our door toward the voices and raised both her fists up in the air. Mrs. Carmichael pressed her face close to the door window and whispered something I could barely hear. Baby, please hide, just hide somewhere. She was talking to Kilkenny through the glass and completely ignoring the 20 kids behind her who were still on the floor crying and shaking. The shouting got louder and closer, and I heard heavy boots running on the tile floor. Within seconds, a man's voice cut through everything else with sharp commands about putting the weapon down and keeping hands where they could see them. Then I heard Kilkenny screaming at the top of her lungs about how he ruined everything, and her voice cracked like she was sobbing and yelling at the same time. A calmer voice that sounded older told her to lie flat on the ground and not move while backup secured the area. I heard more footsteps and radio static and people talking in that fast-clipped way cops talk during emergencies. A key scraped in our classroom lock and the door flew open so hard it banged against the wall. Two adults I recognized from the main office rushed in and started yelling for everyone to get out right now and move toward the nearest exit. One of them grabbed Missy Carmichael by the shoulders and physically pushed her away from the doorway. We all scrambled up from the floor and stampeded into the hallway past officers in uniforms who had guns drawn and pointed down the corridor. I stepped over scattered backpacks and someone's smashed phone with the screen cracked into a spiderweb pattern. My legs felt wobbly and strange like they might give out any second, but I kept moving with the crowd. When we got to the main hallway, I saw Kilkenny lying face down on the floor with plastic zip ties around both wrists behind her back. The school resource officer was kneeling beside her saying something too quiet for me to hear. Paramedics rushed past us carrying big orange bags and headed toward the south wing where the science classrooms were. Someone near me said they heard 3 people got shot, but nobody knew yet if anyone was dead. The fear in the air felt so thick I could barely breathe and my chest hurt from trying to take in enough oxygen. They herded us all into the gym and started separating people into groups based on what classroom we came from. A woman in a dark suit went around with plastic evidence bags and made everyone put their phones inside, and she sealed each bag with a number written on it. A man with gray hair and tired eyes came over to our group and asked me specifically to tell him everything I knew about where Nick was this morning. I explained about the puppy pickup and pulled up the text messages again before my phone got taken. I showed him the timestamps and the photos of the golden retriever and the location data that proved Nick was miles away from the school. The detective just nodded and wrote stuff down in a little notebook without telling me if that was good enough or if Nick was in trouble. My chest got tight with frustration because I needed to know if the evidence mattered or if they still thought my best friend did this. Ambulance sirens were wailing outside so loud I could hear them even inside the gym, and through the high windows I could see them loading people onto stretchers. A girl from my English class leaned over and whispered that she heard the intercom announcement naming Nick happen twice. She said once right before the lockdown started, and then again a few minutes later during the chaos. The rumor spread through our group really fast that whoever called in the tip really wanted everyone to believe it was Nick who was shooting. I spotted Miss Carmichael on the other side of the gym being walked out by 2 administrators, and her hands were behind her back like she was in handcuffs or something. When she passed close to where our group was sitting, she looked right at me, but her eyes went through me like I was invisible. The cold, empty look on her face made my skin crawl, because just this morning she was teaching us about polynomials, and now she looked like a completely different person. Parents started flooding into the parking lot outside, and I watched through the windows as families ran to each other crying and hugging. My dad was stuck at his job 2 hours away, and my mom wasn't picking up her phone no matter how many times I tried to call. I sat down alone on the gym floor with my back against the wall and started replaying every single detail in my head. I realized I might be the only person who could actually prove Nick was innocent because I had all those texts with the timestamps and the photos. A detective with kind eyes and smile lines around his mouth walked over and crouched down next to me. He introduced himself as Lance Patton and asked if I would be willing to give a formal statement about the messages from Nick. I showed him every single text going back to last night with all the timestamps clearly visible. I pulled up the puppy photos Nick sent me this morning and the location data that showed exactly where he was when the shooting started. Detective Patton took out his phone and carefully photographed each screen while I held it steady. When he finished, he thanked me for staying calm and said I did a really good job keeping that evidence safe. About 20 minutes later, one of the staff members walked over with a plastic evidence bag and handed me back my phone. The screen was still lit up because it had been charging somewhere, and when I unlocked it, I saw Nick's name everywhere. 17 missed calls, 32 text messages. The notifications kept coming in even as I stared at the screen. I hit his contact and the phone rang twice before he picked up. His voice came through broken and shaky, and I could tell immediately he'd been crying for a while. He asked me why the news was saying he shot up the school when he'd been at a breeder's house picking up a puppy all morning. I tried to explain what happened, but my own voice kept cracking because hearing him so destroyed made everything feel more real. He said his parents were freaking out, and neighbors were staring at their house and someone had already spray-painted something on their garage door. The call lasted maybe 5 minutes before his mom took the phone and said they needed to go talk to a lawyer. I sat there holding my phone feeling completely useless because my best friend's life was falling apart and I couldn't do anything to stop it. I opened our group chat and watched it explode in real time with new messages popping up faster than I could read them. Half the people were defending Nick saying there's no way he'd hurt anyone, and the other half were convinced he planned the whole thing with Kilkenny as some twisted revenge plot. Someone posted a screenshot of the intercom announcement with Nick's name clearly stated, and within seconds it got shared to 3 other group chats. Another person shared a photo of Nick from last year's basketball team with a caption asking how we could have missed the signs. I watched my best friend get turned into a monster by people who'd known him since elementary school, and the anger building in my chest made me want to throw my phone across the gym. Someone posted a theory that Nick and Kilkenny were secret partners, and the breakup was fake to throw everyone off. The messages kept coming and coming, and I had to close the app because I couldn't watch it anymore. My dad finally showed up around 5:30 and drove me home without saying much. We sat in the driveway for a few minutes, and he asked if I was okay, and I said yes, even though we both knew I wasn't. Inside the house, I went straight to my room and lay on my bed staring at the ceiling. At exactly 6 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a robocall, and I saw it was from the school district. Principal Palmer's voice came through the speaker, sounding exhausted and scripted like she'd recorded the message 15 times before getting it right. She announced that school would be closed for the next 2 days, and crisis counseling would be available for any students or families who needed it. Her voice had this flat quality, like she was reading from a legal document instead of talking to actual people. I wondered if she knew yet that one of her own teachers had helped cause this whole nightmare, or if she still thought it was just a random tragedy. The message ended with a number to call for support services, and then the line went dead. I turned on the TV and flipped to the local news channel. The anchor was doing a story about the shooting, and suddenly Nick's school photo filled the screen. They named him specifically as the student identified in an anonymous tip, even though the reporter also said no charges had been filed against anyone yet. The words on the screen said, "person of interest," and I wanted to scream because that wasn't true at all. Then they cut to footage from earlier today, and I saw Nick standing in someone's driveway holding a golden retriever puppy. The reporter was doing a voiceover about how police were investigating his whereabouts during the incident. Watching my best friend get destroyed on television while he was literally holding an innocent puppy made the injustice burn in my throat. The news made it sound like he was guilty and just hadn't been arrested yet. I grabbed the remote and shut off the TV because I couldn't watch anymore. That night I lay in bed unable to sleep and kept replaying Mrs. Carmichael's face in my head. I saw her expression when she read those texts about Kilkenny leaving Nick 66 missed calls. The way her whole face changed from concern to pure rage in about 2 seconds. She'd gripped my phone so hard her knuckles turned white, and I could see the hatred in her eyes when she looked at Nick's messages. She didn't block that classroom door to protect us from a shooter. She blocked it to protect her daughter from consequences. Everything she did was about keeping Kilkenny safe, even if it meant putting 20 other students in danger. The realization made me feel sick, because I trusted her to keep us safe, and instead, she'd used us as shields for her own kid. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Nick with a photo attached. The image showed the golden retriever puppy sleeping on his chest with its tiny paws stretched out. The caption said, "Only good thing about today." Looking at something so innocent and happy felt wrong against everything else that had happened. The puppy had no idea that its owner was called a school shooter on the news. It just knew it was warm and safe and loved. I saved the photo to my camera roll anyway because we both needed to remember that good things still existed somewhere in the world. About an hour later, my phone buzzed with a notification that Nick had sent a voice memo. I hit play and heard his voice walking me through his entire morning in careful detail. He said he left home at 7 in the morning, and his mom had taken a photo of him in the car to mark the occasion. He arrived at the breeder's house at 8:30, and there were security cameras that would have recorded him pulling into the driveway. He met the puppy at 9 o'clock, and the breeder had time-stamped photos of the whole interaction. The first, "Why is everyone texting me?" message came through at exactly 10:47 when he was still at the breeder's house signing paperwork. His voice shook the whole time, but the timeline was rock solid with evidence for every single minute. I saved the voice memo immediately because this was proof that could clear his name. I pulled up Detective Patton's business card from my wallet and found his email address printed at the bottom. I forwarded all of Nick's screenshots showing his timeline along with the voice memo he'd just sent me. Then I added my own timeline in the email body, explaining exactly when the intercom announcement happened and what Mizzy Carmichael had said and done. Writing it all out and hitting send made me feel slightly less powerless. Taking action instead of just waiting around gave me something concrete to do. Maybe I could actually help fix this mess instead of just watching my best friend's life get destroyed. My phone rang about 30 minutes later, and Detective Patton's name showed up on the screen. I answered, and he told me they'd obtained a recording of a voicemail that Mrs. Carmichael had left on someone's phone. His voice stayed carefully neutral, but I could hear the significance in his tone when he quoted what she'd said. "I fixed it, baby. Just stay put and let me handle everything." My hands started shaking as I held the phone, because this was proof that I wasn't crazy about what I'd seen. She really had been protecting Kilkenny the whole time. The detective said the voicemail provided important context for understanding Miss Carmichael's actions during the lockdown. I felt this rush of vindication mixed with anger, because now someone official was finally seeing what I'd witnessed. Detective Patton kept talking and explained they were executing search warrants for both Carmichael's phones and computers. He said the investigation was moving quickly because of all the evidence I'd provided by keeping those text messages and forwarding Nick's timeline. The detective's voice got warmer when he told me I'd done exactly the right thing by preserving everything and acting fast. Hearing actual validation from a real detective made the knot in my chest loosen slightly. Someone with authority was finally taking this seriously and working to clear Nick's name. The call ended with Detective Patton telling me to reach out if I remembered any other details and thanking me again for my help. I set my phone down and took the first deep breath I'd managed since yesterday morning. My phone buzzed with an email notification from Principal Palmer about 20 minutes after Detective Patton hung up. The subject line read, "Important communication to all families. and I opened it immediately. She wrote about the importance of not spreading rumors during an active investigation and reminded everyone that no charges had been filed against any student at this time. The email never mentioned Nick by name, but everyone would know exactly who she meant. I scrolled through the message twice looking for something more direct, some actual defense of Nick, but the careful language protected the school more than it protected him. The comments section under the email on the parent portal was already filling up with people arguing about whether this cleared Nick or not. Screenshots of the email started appearing in group chats within minutes because parents were forwarding it everywhere. The internet never forgets, and now Nick's name was permanently linked to this shooting even though he was never actually involved. My phone kept buzzing with messages from the group chat with kids from the school. Someone posted that they heard the SRO disarmed Kilkenny without firing his weapon at all. Another person said she surrendered the moment she saw him coming around the corner. The details kept coming through in short bursts of messages. Kilkenny had been running through the hallways firing randomly, and that's how people got hurt. She wasn't aiming at anyone specific, just shooting wildly while crying and screaming. 3 people got hit, but none of them were her actual targets because she didn't really have targets. Reading about how pointless and sad the whole thing was made my chest feel heavy. She hurt people by accident while having some kind of breakdown over a breakup. The group chat kept moving with people adding more details they'd heard from siblings or parents who worked at the school. Nobody died, but Miss Fulton, the art teacher, got shot in the shoulder, and 2 students got hit by broken glass and concrete chips. The randomness of who got hurt and who didn't felt like the worst part somehow. A notification popped up from someone I barely knew from history class. She sent me a direct message with a photo attached and no explanation at first. I opened the image and saw someone in baggy clothes and a dark hood standing near the south entrance of the school. The timestamp on the photo showed this morning right before the lockdown started. I zoomed in on the figure and could make out blonde hair under the hood and a number on what looked like a basketball jersey. The number 67 stood out clearly even in the grainy photo. My hand started shaking as I stared at the evidence on my screen. This classmate had accidentally photographed Kilkenny dressed up like Nick right before she started shooting. I saved the photo immediately to my camera roll and then opened my conversation with Detective Patton. My fingers fumbled on the keyboard as I typed out a message explaining what I was sending and who took the photo. I attached the image and hit send before I could second-guess myself. Another piece of the puzzle was now in the detective's hands, and I felt like I was actually helping build the case against Mrs. Carmichael. Someone from another class posted a different photo in a public group chat that got shared everywhere within an hour. The image showed Missy Carmichael inside our classroom, with her face twisted up in this look of total focus. Her hands were wrapped around the intercom cord, and she was clearly ripping it from the wall. You could see the determination in her expression and the way her whole body was pulling on that cord. The photo must have been taken by someone through the door window during the lockdown. Comments started piling up under the image on every platform where it got reposted. Some people wrote things defending her and saying she was just protecting students from a dangerous situation. Other people wrote that she was obviously helping the shooter by cutting off communication. I read through dozens of comments and knew exactly which side was telling the truth. The photo went viral on local social media pages, and news sites picked it up by evening. Watching Missy Carmichael's face in that photo made me angry all over again, because she looked so sure of herself while she was blocking our escape. Detective Patton called the next afternoon and asked if I could come to the station to give a formal statement. My dad took off work early and drove me there in silence, because neither of us knew what to say about any of this. The police station smelled like coffee and cleaning products, and the detective led us to a small interview room with a table and chairs. He set up a recording device on the table and explained that everything I said would be documented as part of the official investigation. My dad sat next to me and nodded for me to start whenever I was ready. Detective Patton walked me through the entire timeline starting from when the intercom announcement first happened. He asked me to repeat exactly what Miss Carmichael said about Nick breaking up with Kilkenny and humiliating her. I told him about her reading the texts out loud and how her whole face changed when she saw the messages about the missed calls. The detective asked specific questions about her tone and body language when she talked about Nick getting his perfect life. I realized while answering that they were building a case about motive, and Mrs. Carmichael's actions weren't just panic, but actual planning. The interview lasted almost an hour, and my voice was tired by the end, but I felt good about getting everything on record. The evening news finally ran a correction 2 days after the shooting happened. The anchor read from a script saying the suspect in custody was believed to be a student, but not the individual named in the initial report. They still didn't say Kilkenny's name or clear Nick directly with actual words. The vague language made me want to throw something at the TV because it basically did nothing to fix the damage. I checked social media and found people still arguing about whether Nick was involved somehow. Some comments said the correction proved his innocence, while others insisted he must have planned it with Kilkenny. The conspiracy theories were already spreading faster than the truth could catch up. Nick texted me a screenshot of someone's post, claiming he was definitely guilty, because why else would the school have named him? I wanted to reach through the internet and shake people until they understood basic facts. The correction was too little and too late, and Nick's reputation was already destroyed in the court of public opinion. Detective Patton called me again a few days later with new information about the investigation. He explained that they traced the anonymous tip's IP address back to the school's network system. The timestamp matched exactly with Missy Carmichael's prep period when she didn't have any class to teach. She would have been free to access a computer in the teacher's lounge or main office during that time. The technical evidence was piling up, so high that even her lawyer would have trouble explaining it away. I asked if this meant they could prove she sent the tip, and he said they were getting very close to that conclusion. Every phone call with the detective made me feel like the truth was getting closer to the surface. The investigation was moving forward with real evidence instead of just rumors and speculation. Knowing that professionals were building a solid case gave me hope that justice might actually happen. The detective sent me an email with security footage stills attached as evidence of what they'd found. The first image showed Kilkenny wearing Nick's jersey with the number 67 visible and the hood pulled up over her head. She was entering through the south door where my classmate had photographed someone that same morning. Another still showed Miss Carmichael standing near the main office right before the intercom announcement went out. The timestamp on that image was less than 5 minutes before the lockdown started. The visual evidence was so clear and damning that I couldn't understand how Ms. Carmichael thought she'd get away with this. Everything was documented by cameras and computers and digital records that couldn't be erased. She must have been so focused on protecting Kilkenny that she didn't think about how much proof she was leaving behind. I saved the stills to show Nick later because he deserved to see the evidence that was clearing his name. Word spread through school channels that the teachers' union had assigned someone to shadow Miss Carmichael during the investigation. She got placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of everything Detective Patton was building. I felt this weird mix of emotions when I heard the news. Part of me was angry at what she did and wanted her punished as harshly as possible. Another part of me felt sorry for a mother who loved her daughter so much that she destroyed her own career trying to protect her. Miss Carmichael had taught at our school for 15 years, and now she'd never teach anywhere again. Her entire professional life was over because she couldn't accept that her daughter had serious problems. The complicated feelings made my head hurt because I wanted simple anger, but kept finding sympathy mixed in. Counselor Pope sent an email to everyone from our classroom about scheduling small group sessions. She wanted to help us process what happened and give us tools for coping with the fear. I signed up for the first session, even though the idea of talking about feelings with classmates made me uncomfortable. 6 of us showed up in her office and sat in a circle of chairs that felt too close together. Counselor Pope explained that we'd start by sharing one feeling without explaining or defending it. She went around the circle and people said things like scared and confused and sad. When it was my turn, I said angry because that was simpler than trying to explain the betrayal of a trusted adult. The word came out harder than I meant it to, and everyone looked at me. Counselor Pope just nodded and moved on to the next person without making me elaborate. The session lasted 40 minutes and I left feeling slightly less alone in my anger. My phone buzzed in my pocket while I walked to the parking lot. Nick's name lit up the screen with 3 new messages, and I opened them expecting more puppy photos or questions about homework. Instead, I saw screenshots of comments calling him a murderer and posts with his home address visible in the images. Someone had found his parents' workplace and posted the phone number telling people to call and demand they fire the parents of a school shooter. Another screenshot showed a Facebook group with over 200 members dedicated to discussing what a monster Nick was and how he deserved prison time. I felt sick reading through each image because these were real people saying horrible things about someone who wasn't even at the school that day. My hands shook as I screenshotted every single message Nick sent me and opened my email to Detective Patton. I typed a quick message explaining what Nick was receiving and attached all the screenshots with the subject line cyber harassment evidence. Hitting send felt like doing something useful, instead of just watching my best friend get destroyed online by people who didn't know anything real about what happened. The detective responded within 20 minutes saying he was adding the harassment to his case file and would follow up on the most serious threats. Knowing someone official was paying attention helped, but it didn't stop my anger at how fast people believed lies and how slow they were to accept truth. 2 days later, Detective Patton called me with an update about the forensics report on Miss Carmichael's classroom. He explained that the lab examined the intercom cord and determined it was ripped from the wall by hand force from inside the room, not damaged by any shooter or during evacuation chaos. The specific way the wires were torn and the location of the damage proved someone standing inside the classroom near the wall unit pulled it out deliberately. I remembered watching her yank that cord out while we were all on the floor terrified, and I told the detective I saw it happen with my own eyes. He said my witness statement combined with the physical evidence made it impossible for her to claim it was an accident or collateral damage. I imagined a prosecutor standing in front of a jury, holding up photos of that torn cord and explaining how a teacher intentionally cut off the only way for authorities to communicate with her classroom during an active shooter situation. The image in my head of Miss Carmichael sitting at a defendant's table, listening to that evidence being presented, made me feel something between satisfaction and sadness. Counselor Pope scheduled my second session for Thursday afternoon, and I showed up feeling less nervous than the first time. She started by asking how I was managing my anger since our last conversation, and I admitted I was still really mad, but trying to channel it into helping Detective Patton instead of just stewing in it. Then I said something I hadn't planned to say about feeling guilty for not speaking up sooner about Miss Carmichael's weird behavior. I explained that looking back, there were small signs that she was too involved in Kilkenny's relationship drama, and maybe if I'd mentioned it to someone before the shooting, things would have been different. Counselor Pope leaned forward and said, naming the guilt was the first step to releasing it, and that I couldn't have predicted what would happen based on a teacher being overprotective of her daughter. She reminded me that hundreds of parents are too involved in their kids' relationships, and it doesn't lead to the school shootings, so connecting those dots beforehand would have been impossible. Hearing her say that made the weight in my chest feel slightly lighter, like maybe I wasn't responsible for missing warning signs that weren't actually visible. I left that session feeling fractionally better and more able to breathe deeply without that constant pressure. Detective Patton called again the following week to update me on Kilkenny's situation. He said she had requested a lawyer immediately after being taken into custody and was now undergoing a mental health evaluation before any charges would be finalized. The evaluation would determine her competency to stand trial and help the court understand her mental state during the shooting. Learning she was getting psychiatric help made me feel really conflicted because part of me wanted her punished as harshly as possible for trying to kill people. But another part of me recognized she was clearly suffering from something broken inside that made her think violence was a solution to heartbreak. I asked Detective Patton if the mental health evaluation meant she might not face serious consequences, and he explained it was more about getting her the right kind of help while also holding her accountable. The answer didn't resolve my conflicted feelings, but it helped me understand that the justice system was trying to balance punishment with treatment. That same afternoon, I found out from a group chat that Missy Fulton, the art teacher, got shot in the shoulder during the shooting. Someone posted that she'd need months of physical therapy and might not regain full range of motion in her arm. Reading that made everything feel heavier and more real than any news report, because Ms. Fulton was someone I saw in the hallways every day. She always said hi to students and displayed our artwork on the walls outside her classroom. Knowing a real person I recognized was permanently hurt because of what Kilkenny did and what Mizzy Carmichael enabled made the whole situation feel less like a news story and more like something that actually destroyed people's lives. I wondered if Missy Fulton would ever feel safe at the school again, or if she'd have flashbacks every time she heard a loud noise in the hallway. A student from another class forwarded me a text message where Ms. Carmichael had privately messaged him, asking to set the record straight about what really happened. The message said she just wanted students to understand she was trying to protect everyone, and that the situation got misunderstood. The student told me he immediately sent the screenshot to Principal Palmer, because it felt wrong for a teacher under investigation to be contacting students about her case. Reading Ms. Carmichael's attempt to manipulate students even while facing serious consequences made my disgust complete. She wasn't just a mother who made a bad choice in the moment anymore. She was actively trying to change the narrative and recruit students to her side, like we were all too stupid to remember what actually happened. I forwarded that screenshot to Detective Patton, too, because it seemed like more evidence of her trying to obstruct the investigation. Detective Patton scheduled another interview with me, this time specifically focused on Miss Carmichael's comments about the breakup and Kilkenny's emotional state. I sat in the same room at the police station with my dad beside me and walked through exactly what she said about Nick humiliating Kilkenny in front of her colleagues. I described how her face changed when she read the texts about the 66 missed calls, and how she said Nick thought he could just move on to his perfect life. The detective asked me to repeat certain phrases multiple times and wrote everything down carefully. When I finished, he nodded like I was confirming something he already suspected, and said my testimony matched what other students reported. Knowing I wasn't the only witness to her behavior made me feel more confident that the truth would actually come out. SRO Hardy released an official statement through the school district about the disarmament of Kilkenny. The statement explained he used verbal commands and minimal physical restraint to get her to drop the weapon and surrender peacefully. He included specific details about his training and the protocols he followed to prevent rumors that he hurt her unnecessarily during the confrontation. Reading his professional account of staying calm while a student pointed a weapon at him made me respect him even more. He could have panicked or used excessive force, but instead he did exactly what his training taught him, and nobody died because of it. The statement also mentioned he'd been offered counseling services because even trained professionals need help processing traumatic events. That detail made him seem more human, and less like just a security officer doing his job. Detective Patton sent me another email with security logs attached, showing that Nick's jersey went missing from his gym locker 2 days before the shooting. The logs included a copy of the stolen property form Nick filed himself reporting the theft. Seeing that documentation proved Kilkenny didn't just grab his jersey on impulse the morning of the shooting. She planned it days in advance, stole it deliberately, and wore it specifically to frame him. The premeditation implied by that timeline made everything feel more calculated and less like a spontaneous breakdown from a heartbroken teenager. It meant she thought about hurting people and destroying Nick's reputation for at least 48 hours before actually doing it. That cold planning scared me more than imagining someone snapping in the moment. During our next group counseling session, Sophia admitted something that made everyone go quiet. She said she saw Kilkenny crying in the guidance office last week, saying something about making him sorry. Sophia explained she didn't report it because breakup drama seemed normal, and she figured Kilkenny just meant she'd make Nick sorry by moving on or dating someone else. Now looking back, those words had a completely different meaning, And we all sat there carrying the weight of wondering if we could have prevented this. Counselor Pope reminded us that hindsight makes everything seem obvious, but in the moment we had no reason to interpret teenage relationship drama as a genuine threat. She said we can't blame ourselves for not being mind readers, but we could learn to take threats more seriously in the future. Everyone nodded, but I could tell we all still felt guilty for not saying something to an adult about what Sophia heard. 2 days later, an email from Principal Palmer hit my inbox with the subject line, Policy Review and Administrative Update. I opened it expecting more generic crisis response language, but the third paragraph made me sit up straight. The administration was conducting a formal review of the conflict between evacuation protocols and shelter-in-place procedures, and they specifically named Mrs. Carmichael's classroom as an example where direct evacuation commands were violated. Seeing the system actually acknowledge her failure in official writing felt like someone finally believed what I witnessed. The email went to every family in the district, which meant thousands of people now knew she ignored orders during an active threat. My dad read it over my shoulder and nodded slowly, saying the school was covering themselves legally, but also doing the right thing by admitting mistakes happened. The validation made something tight in my chest loosen slightly, like maybe the truth would actually matter in the end. The next afternoon, Detective Patton called my cell and asked if I could stop by the station after school. When I arrived, he had printouts spread across his desk, showing phone records and cell tower data. He explained that Missy Carmichael's phone pinged near the IT help desk at 10:34 a.m., exactly 4 minutes before the anonymous tip got submitted through the school network. The technical evidence was stacking up, so high that even someone who wanted to believe her innocence would struggle to explain it away. Patton walked me through the timeline, pointing at highlighted sections showing her device connecting to the guest network, then the tip submission, then her return to her classroom. He said phone records don't lie, and this data built an undeniable timeline of her involvement in framing Nick. I asked if this was enough to charge her, and he said the DA was reviewing everything. But yes, this was significant evidence. Watching him organize the proof into a clear sequence made me feel like justice was actually moving forward, instead of just being promised. Saturday morning, I drove to Nick's house for the first time since the shooting. His mom answered the door looking exhausted but grateful, and she hugged me before leading me to the backyard where Nick sat on the grass. The golden retriever puppy bounded between us, chasing a tennis ball and tripping over its own paws, and we just watched it play without saying much for almost an hour. Nick threw the ball and the puppy brought it back, and the simple repetition of that normal activity felt healing in a way I couldn't explain. Eventually, Nick broke the silence and said, people keep messaging him asking for his side of the story, wanting him to post something dramatic on social media. I told him every word we say gets twisted by someone, and he agreed that staying quiet felt like the only safe choice right now. We decided together not to post anything online because the evidence would speak for itself eventually, and feeding the internet drama would only make things worse. The puppy fell asleep between us in the sun, and sitting there with my best friend doing something normal helped me remember we were still just teenagers trying to survive something that never should have happened. The following Tuesday, another email arrived from the school board, this time announcing Miss Carmichael's pre-disciplinary meeting had been scheduled with union representation present. The message used careful bureaucratic language about following due process and ensuring fair procedures for all staff members. Reading those formal phrases made me impatient because I wanted her fired immediately, but my dad explained that rules exist for good reasons, even when we don't like how slow they work. He said if they skipped proper procedures, she could sue and maybe win, which would be worse than waiting a few more weeks. The email also mentioned that families would be updated as the process moved forward, and I appreciated the transparency, even though the timeline frustrated me. Part of growing up was learning that justice doesn't happen instantly like in movies, and sometimes doing things right means doing things slowly. 3 days later, a certified mail envelope arrived at my house requiring a signature. Inside was a subpoena ordering me to appear as a witness at Mrs. Carmichael's administrative hearing in 2 weeks. The legal language was confusing and intimidating, full of phrases like pursuant to and under penalty of law, and my hands shook holding the paper. My dad sat down with me at the kitchen table and explained what it meant, that I was being officially required to testify about what I saw and heard during the lockdown. He said telling the truth under oath was serious, but I shouldn't be nervous because I wasn't in trouble. I was helping establish facts. We talked through what kinds of questions they might ask, and he reminded me to answer only what was asked without volunteering extra information. Despite his reassurance, I felt nervous about standing in front of adults and talking about the worst day of my life, but I was also determined to make sure the truth came out. The subpoena made everything feel more real and official, like this was actually going to result in consequences. Rumors started spreading through group chats about Kilkenny's psychological evaluation, with people claiming to know someone who knew someone who worked at the courthouse. According to the gossip, the evaluation showed she was having an acute mental health crisis and developed obsessive thoughts about Nick after the breakup. I had no way to verify if the rumors were accurate, but they matched what I'd seen in those text messages about the 66 missed calls and her behavior that morning. Learning she was genuinely suffering from something broken in her mind didn't excuse what she did or make it okay that she brought a weapon to the school, but it did help me understand how a person gets from heartbreak to violence. how pain can twist into something dangerous when it's not treated. The rumors made me think about all the warning signs nobody took seriously, because teenage relationship drama seems normal until it isn't. Mental health problems don't justify hurting people, but maybe if she'd gotten help earlier, none of this would have happened. That same week, I made the mistake of Googling my name and found an anonymous forum thread about the upcoming hearing. Someone had posted claiming my testimony was just bro code cover-up and that I was lying to protect Nick because we were friends. The thread filled with strangers questioning my honesty, saying I probably helped him plan it, or at least knew something I wasn't telling. Reading people who'd never met me attack my character made me furious, and I wanted to create an account and defend myself. But I remembered what Nick and I agreed about staying quiet, and I closed the browser instead. The evidence would speak louder than internet trolls who just wanted drama to argue about. Detective Patton had the texts, the timestamps, the phone records, the security footage, and dozens of witness statements. Some random people online claiming I was lying didn't change facts, and I had to trust that truth would win out over conspiracy theories. A few days before the hearing, Detective Patton sent me another email update that made my jaw drop. The anonymous tip email was sent through a guest network account that required badge authentication to access, and the logs showed Mr. Carmichael's badge was used to log in exactly 3 minutes before the tip was submitted. He explained that the school's guest network made users scan their employee badge to prevent abuse, and the system automatically recorded who accessed it and when. This technical proof was so solid that even her lawyer would struggle to explain it away, because you can't fake badge authentication logs. Patton said this evidence combined with the phone records and security footage created an undeniable timeline of her actions that morning. He thanked me again for preserving those text messages because my quick thinking had started the investigation that uncovered all this other proof. Reading his email made me feel proud that I'd helped build the case, even though I wished none of this had been necessary in the first place. Counselor Pope called me down to her office for a one-on-one meeting to help me prepare for testimony. She explained that testifying can be stressful because lawyers ask questions designed to confuse you or make you doubt yourself, and she wanted to teach me skills to stay calm. We practiced breathing techniques for managing anxiety, and she coached me on how to pause before answering instead of rushing to fill silence. She reminded me over and over to stick to facts and avoid getting emotional or defensive, even if questions felt unfair. Pope said telling the truth isn't the same as getting revenge, and my job was just to describe what I saw and heard without trying to convince anyone of anything. The practice session made me feel more grounded about the hearing because I had strategies for handling difficult moments. She also said it was okay to say I don't know or I don't remember, instead of guessing, which took some pressure off. By the end of our meeting, I felt nervous but prepared, like I could actually do this without falling apart. That weekend, Nick texted me that he was meeting with his attorney Rowan Perkins to draft a statement for the media. He called me later and explained that Perkins advised him to focus on clearing his name rather than attacking Kilkenny or Mrs. Carmichael personally. Nick said he decided to take the high road and just present facts about where he was that morning and what evidence proved his innocence. He wasn't going to talk about Kilkenny's mental health or Mr. Carmichael's motives because that would make him look vindictive and distract from the simple truth that he was never there. His maturity in choosing the high road impressed me because I was still angry enough to want them both punished as harshly as possible. But Nick reminded me that revenge and justice aren't the same thing, and he just wanted his name cleared so he could move forward with his life. Listening to him talk about forgiveness and focusing on facts made me respect him even more, and I realized he was handling this nightmare better than most adults would. That night, I sat in my room with my phone in my hands, scrolling back through the texts Nick sent me the morning everything went wrong. The first message was a photo of the golden retriever puppy with huge brown eyes and floppy ears. Nick's caption said, "Look at this face," with like 6 exclamation points. The next message was another photo of him holding the puppy against his chest, both of them looking at the camera. His smile was so genuine and excited, just a kid getting his first dog. The timestamp read 9:23 a.m., exactly 40 minutes before the lockdown announcement. I stared at that innocent, happy moment captured right before his world exploded. The contrast between that pure joy and everything that came after made my chest ache. I saved both photos to a separate folder on my phone, something I could look at when I needed to remember what was real. The truth was simple, and Nick was picking up a puppy while Kilkenny was putting on his jersey and walking into school with a weapon. Remembering that helped me feel ready to tell what I saw tomorrow. I practiced my testimony quietly in my mirror, trying to keep my voice steady while recounting the facts. By midnight, I felt as prepared as I could be, even though my stomach was still twisted in knots. The hearing room was smaller than I expected, more like a conference room than a courtroom. Mrs. Carmichael sat at one table with her lawyer and the union rep. The hearing panel consisted of 3 administrators from the district office, all looking serious and tired. My dad squeezed my shoulder before I walked to the witness chair. The panel chair asked me to state my name and confirm I understood I was testifying under oath. My voice came out quieter than I wanted, but I managed to get through it. They asked me to describe what happened in the classroom that morning. I started with the intercom announcement naming Nick, then explained how Mr. Carmichael blocked the door and disabled the badge reader. My hands were shaking, so I gripped the edge of the table. I told them about her reading the texts about Kilkenny's 66 missed calls, how her face changed from concern to rage. When I described her saying Nick humiliated her daughter, my voice cracked slightly, but I pushed through. I explained how she ripped the intercom cord from the wall and kept texting frantically while gunshots got closer. The panel asked specific questions about timing and exact words. I stuck to facts and avoided adding my opinions about her motives. By the end, I felt drained, but also lighter, like I'd carried something heavy for weeks and finally put it down. Walking back to my seat, I caught Miss Carmichael staring at me with this blank expression that made my skin crawl. After I stepped down, Hardy took the stand in his full uniform. He explained proper evacuation procedures with calm authority, describing how lockdown drills are supposed to work. The panel asked him about Miss Carmichael's claim that keeping students in the room was safer. Hardy's response was professional but firm. He said that when evacuation is ordered, teachers must comply immediately because command staff has information individual teachers don't have. He walked through how he disarmed Kilkenny using verbal commands and minimal physical contact, demonstrating the proper technique. Then he addressed Missy Carmichael's defense directly. He stated clearly that blocking student evacuation during an active threat violated every protocol and endangered lives. His testimony included specific policy numbers and training requirements. I watched Miss Carmichael's lawyer lean over to whisper something to her, and her face went pale. Hardy finished by saying that Missy Carmichael's actions created chaos and prevented students from reaching designated safe zones. The panel members took notes furiously during his entire statement. When he stepped down, I noticed the union rep shuffling papers like he was trying to figure out how to counter that kind of professional credibility. Next came the IT specialist, a guy in khakis and a polo shirt who set up a laptop connected to a projector. He walked through the technical evidence with slides showing badge access logs. The screen displayed Missy Carmichael's employee ID number and the exact timestamp when her badge authenticated on the guest network. He explained that the school's system required physical badge scanning to prevent unauthorized access. Then he showed the network logs proving that 3 minutes after her badge scan, the anonymous tip email was sent from that same guest account. He pulled up photos of the intercom cord in Missy Carmichael's classroom, showing the physical damage where it had been yanked from the wall socket. The specialist pointed out specific details about how the cord was torn versus accidentally disconnected. His presentation was kind of boring with all the technical terms, but watching the evidence pile up felt satisfying. Each slide removed any possibility that Missy Carmichael could claim coincidence or mistake. The panel asked questions about whether someone could have stolen her badge. He responded that the badge was returned to her at the end of that day, and security footage showed her wearing it all morning. By the time he finished, the evidence felt completely overwhelming. Then Miss Carmichael stood to give her statement. Her lawyer had obviously coached her because she spoke carefully, pausing between sentences. She claimed she acted purely out of panic and maternal instinct when she heard the lockdown announcement. Tears rolled down her face as she insisted she never sent any anonymous tip and someone must have stolen her badge without her knowledge. She said she blocked the door because she genuinely believed the shooter was in the hallways and students would be safer staying put. Her voice shook when she talked about being a mother first and how any parent would protect their child. She denied ripping the intercom cord intentionally, saying it must have gotten damaged during the chaos. Listening to her lie under oath while crying made me feel this weird mix of emotions. Part of me was furious at her dishonesty and how she was trying to play victim, but another part felt sad watching someone destroy themselves with lies when the truth was already proven. She kept glancing at the panel members like she was trying to gauge if they believed her. When she mentioned her 15 years of service to the district, I wanted to stand up and remind everyone that none of that mattered compared to what she did to Nick and to us. Her lawyer sat down, and the union rep stood up to make his argument. He acknowledged that Miss Carmichael made errors in judgment, but requested the panel consider unpaid leave instead of immediate termination. He cited her clean record over 15 years and argued that due process required considering her entire career, not just one incident. The rep talked about how teachers make split-second decisions during crises, and sometimes those decisions are wrong, but not malicious. He requested a formal investigation with appropriate timelines, rather than rushing to judgment. Part of me respected that everyone deserves fair procedures and proper representation. The system has rules for good reasons, even when someone clearly did something terrible. But I also knew what she did was unforgivable, and she needed to face real consequences. She didn't just make a bad decision in the moment. She sent that tip before anything happened, then blocked us in while knowing her daughter was the actual threat. The union rep finished by requesting the panel recommend counseling and retraining rather than career destruction. I looked over at Nick's empty seat next to my dad and felt my jaw clench. The panel took 30 minutes to deliberate in a private room while we all sat in uncomfortable silence. When they returned, the chair read their interim finding from a prepared statement. Miss Carmichael was suspended without pay effective immediately, pending completion of the criminal investigation. They recommended termination proceedings begin through proper channels and that all evidence be forwarded to the district attorney. The statement said her actions violated district policy, endangered students, and demonstrated conduct unbecoming of an educator. They cited specific policy violations, including failure to follow evacuation orders and deliberate destruction of emergency communication equipment. Relief washed through my entire body as I heard those words. The system was actually working, even if it felt slower than I wanted. Mrs. Carmichael started crying harder, her lawyer putting a hand on her shoulder. The union rep nodded like he expected this outcome. My dad squeezed my hand and I realized I'd been holding my breath. It wasn't over yet because criminal charges would take time, but this felt like justice was finally catching up to what happened. Outside the hearing room, Patton pulled me aside near the water fountain. He said the DA's office reviewed all the evidence and would likely file charges within the next 2 weeks. The charges would probably include making a false report to law enforcement, obstruction of justice, and reckless endangerment of students. Each charge carried serious penalties, and the combination could mean actual jail time. Hearing those official criminal charges listed out loud made everything feel more real and permanent. This wasn't just school discipline anymore, this was the actual legal system holding her accountable. Patton thanked me again for preserving the evidence and testifying clearly. He said my testimony helped establish her state of mind and motive, which strengthened the case significantly. I asked if Nick would have to testify too. Patton said probably not at the criminal trial, because the evidence was strong enough without putting him through that stress. Walking back to my dad's car, I felt this weight lifting that I'd been carrying since that morning in math class. Nick was going to see real justice happen, not just people saying they believed him. 2 days later, I was scrolling through my phone when I saw the news alert. The local station finally ran a story clearing Nick by name. The headline said, "Student falsely accused in the school shooting, evidence proves off-campus location." The article explained how time-stamped photos, location data, and witness statements proved Nick was at a dog breeder's house during the entire incident. They mentioned the anonymous tip was traced back to the school network access and that a teacher had been suspended pending criminal charges. I screenshot the article and sent it to Nick immediately. He responded with a simple "finally" and a tired emoji. I scrolled through the comments section even though I knew I shouldn't. Some people apologized for jumping to conclusions and spreading rumors, but plenty of others still argued he must have been involved somehow, saying the evidence seemed too convenient, or that he probably planned it with Kilkenny. Reading those comments made me realize some people will never let go of their first assumptions, no matter how much proof you show them. The internet had already decided Nick was guilty in those first hours, and screenshots and rumors live forever. Even with his name officially cleared, he'd probably deal with random people bringing this up for years. The following week, Pope gathered us in her office for a group counseling session. She arranged chairs in a circle and started by saying this meeting would focus on practical coping strategies for returning to normal school routines. Pope taught us grounding techniques for managing anxiety, like the 5 senses exercise where you name things you can see, hear, touch, smell, and taste. She explained how to identify personal triggers that might cause panic, like certain sounds or crowded hallways. We practiced breathing exercises that seemed simple, but actually helped slow down my racing heart. Pope talked about how to handle intrusive thoughts about that day, suggesting we acknowledge them without letting them take over. She gave us specific strategies for dealing with the physical spaces where everything happened, like planning alternate routes to avoid Mrs. Carmichael's old classroom. The advice was practical and concrete, rather than just saying everything would be okay. She explained that returning to the school would feel weird and scary at first, but having specific tools to manage those feelings would make it slightly more possible. By the end of the session, going back to regular classes still seemed hard, but maybe not completely impossible. Pope reminded us that healing isn't linear, and some days would be harder than others, which somehow made me feel less pressure to be okay all the time. On our first day back, security guards check every bag at the entrance with handheld metal detectors. Students shuffle through the new protocol with quiet faces, nobody complaining about the extra time or invasion of privacy. The hallways feel different, like everyone's moving more carefully, watching the corners. I head to my locker and notice Sophia walking past the spot where Mrs. Carmichael's classroom used to be. A locker slams shut somewhere down the hall and Sophia jumps, her whole body going stiff for a second before she catches herself. Her hands shake as she adjusts her backpack straps. I catch her eye and she gives me this sad little smile that says she knows I saw. We're all walking around with these invisible cuts that nobody else can see, trying to act normal when nothing feels normal anymore. The intercom crackles during second period and half the class flinches at the sound. Principal Palmer's voice comes through announcing a fire drill schedule, and I watch 3 people visibly relax when they realize it's just routine school business. That afternoon, Nick texts me to meet him outside with the puppy. I find him on the sidewalk near the parking lot, the golden retriever pulling at the leash to sniff everything. 2 girls from our grade walk over, and one of them says she's sorry for spreading rumors about him. The other girl just stares at her shoes and mumbles an apology too. Nick thanks them and says he gets it, that everything was confusing. They walk away, and I see other students pointing at us from across the lot, whispering behind their hands. A group of guys from the football team stare at Nick like they're trying to figure something out, their faces suspicious even though the news cleared him weeks ago. I stay close to Nick as we walk the puppy around the block. Some kid I don't even know yells something about the shooting from a passing car. Nick pretends he didn't hear it, but his jaw gets tight. The puppy stops to pee on a tree, and Nick looks at me with tired eyes. Even though everyone knows the truth now, even though the evidence proved everything, people still look at him different. The stain of being accused doesn't wash off completely, no matter how many times you prove you're innocent. 3 weeks after the hearing, an official letter arrives from the DA's office. They're offering Mrs. Carmichael a plea agreement that includes probation and permanent loss of her teaching license. For Kilkenny, they're pursuing mental health court diversion with supervised treatment. Reading the different approaches makes sense because Mrs. Carmichael made calculated choices to protect her daughter and frame Nick, while Kilkenny was clearly having some kind of mental breakdown. Both of them caused serious harm, but the system recognizes their actions came from different places. I sit down at my desk that night and open a blank document to write my victim impact statement. The cursor blinks at me for a long time before I start typing. I describe what it felt like when Miss Carmichael blocked the door, how my brain couldn't process that an adult I trusted was choosing to trap us. I write about hearing gunshots and watching her text frantically instead of protecting us. I explain how her choice to save her daughter by sacrificing our safety broke something fundamental in how I see authority figures. Putting all the hurt and anger into specific words helps me own the experience instead of letting it control me. By the time I finish writing, my hands are shaking, but I feel lighter, like I've set down something heavy I've been carrying. The school schedules a community forum in the auditorium, and parents pack the rows of seats. Principal Palmer stands at the podium looking exhausted, her voice steady as she walks through everything that went wrong that day. She admits the intercom system failed when Miss Carmichael ripped the cord out. She acknowledges the confusion between evacuation orders and lockdown protocols. She announces new policy changes, including backup communication systems, clearer crisis response training, and additional security measures. Hearing the administration admit their mistakes publicly, instead of making excuses, restores a tiny bit of my faith in the institution. Parents ask tough questions, and Principal Palmer answers them directly without getting defensive. One mom stands up and thanks her for the honesty, and a few other parents clap. It's not enough to fix everything, but it's a start. Miss Carmichael accepts the plea deal in a courtroom hearing I don't attend. The terms include 3 years probation, permanent revocation of her teaching license, mandatory therapy sessions, and restraining orders keeping her away from the school and all students. No jail time, but serious enough consequences that it feels like actual justice. When I hear the news, I let out this long breath I didn't know I was holding. The tension in my shoulders releases and I realize I've been waiting for this moment, needing to know she would face real punishment for what she did. The consequences aren't cruel or excessive, just appropriate for someone who abused their position of trust. Kilkenny enters a residential mental health treatment program as part of her court-supervised diversion. The judge ordered strict no-contact orders with Nick and everyone involved in the incident. The school sends an email announcing support resources for students affected by the shooting, including ongoing counseling and academic accommodations. Knowing Kilkenny is getting professional help instead of just being thrown in jail feels right to me. She clearly needs treatment for whatever broke inside her that made bringing a weapon to the school seem like a solution. Punishment alone won't fix what's wrong, but maybe therapy and medication and time will help her heal into someone who doesn't hurt people. A few weeks later, Nick, Sophia, and I sit in Counselor Pope's office talking about moving forward. Pope asks us about our daily routines and how we're managing the return to normal life. Nick mentions he's been avoiding social media because every time he checks it, someone new is posting about the shooting. Sophia admits she's been having trouble sleeping. I tell Pope about the nightmares where I'm back in that classroom. Pope teaches us about setting boundaries with technology, about recognizing when scrolling through posts about the incident is helping versus hurting. We agree to focus more on real conversations with actual friends instead of reading strangers' opinions online. The discussion about rebuilding feels hopeful in this careful, realistic way that acknowledges we're all changed by what happened, but not permanently broken. Pope reminds us that healing isn't a straight line, that some days will be harder than others, and that's completely normal. I open Reddit late one night and start typing out the whole story from the beginning. I'm not looking for sympathy or trying to score internet points. I just need to document what happens when an adult breaks the trust students place in them, when a teacher chooses family loyalty over student safety. I write about Nick being falsely accused and how quickly people believed he was capable of violence. I describe Missy Carmichael blocking our exit and the moment we realized Kilkenny was the actual shooter. I explain how my best friend almost got destroyed by rumors, even though he was completely innocent. I detail the investigation, the evidence, the hearings, and the final outcomes. Writing it all out feels like closing a chapter, like taking this massive experience and putting it somewhere outside my own head. When I finish typing, I read through the whole post twice before hitting submit. That night, I lie in bed and actually fall asleep without seeing Ms. Carmichael's face or hearing those gunshots. For the first time in 2 months, I sleep all the way through until morning without nightmares waking me up. The story is told now, documented and shared, and somehow that makes it feel less like something that's still happening to me and more like something that happened that I survived. So yeah, that is pretty much it. Nothing dramatic, just another story worth telling. Thanks for sticking around, it honestly feels like chatting with a friend. Come back anytime, the door is open.